a few seconds, let yourself settle in. Welcome back. My ear is really clogged, so I apologize if I sound funny or if I yell at you. That's absolutely not my intention. This happens to me all the time. Super clogged ear. Okay, we talked about the hypothalamus and the pituitary, and we've talked about classes of hormones. We're going to talk about control of this hypothalamus pituitary action. You learned a lot about this in lab, about the feedback mechanisms, positive and negative feedback mechanisms. There are different types of feedback. So long loop negative feedback is when what's called a peripheral endocrine gland produces a hormone that suppresses the secretion of the anterior pituitary and hypothalamic trophic hormones. This is the most common, is this long loop negative feedback. So what the heck does that even mean? Okay, a peripheral endocrine gland. So there are endocrine glands, like the pituitary. The pituitary is way up there in the chain of command. It's not a peripheral endocrine gland. A peripheral, endocrine gland would be an endocrine gland that's at the end, in the periphery, at the end of this cascade. So, for example, the ovaries. The ovaries are a peripheral endocrine gland. In the case of long loop negative feedback, the ovaries would produce a hormone. I'm going to do red. The ovaries would produce a hormone that would feed back up here to the anterior pituitary, and they would tell the anterior pituitary, stop releasing hormone. They would feed back also to the hypothalamus this hormone that the ovary released and tell it, stop producing hormone. So these would be gonadotropin releasing hormone, gonadotropin hormones, right? So the ovaries are telling the control systems to stop. The ovaries, obviously, of course, aren't the only ones that could do that. Any of these glands could do that. Same thing. The adrenal glands do that. They feed back and they tell the master controls, hey, stop. All of these endocrine glands that we've talked about, the thymus does this. The thyroid does it, all of them. They feed back, they give information back to the pituitary and the hypothalamus. So, how might the adrenal glands negatively feed back? So, what would that look like on this image? Maybe think about what the adrenal glands produce. So, I'll just tell you that. The adrenal glands produce cortisol. Always forget if in humans it's cortisol or if it's corticosterone. Cortisol. So just draw what that would look like for a feedback. So something like this. That's not the best way to do that. Adrenal glands are going to feed back to the pituitary and to the hypothalamus. This is what that negative feedback would look like. Okay. Short loop negative feedback is when the pituitary hormone suppresses the hypothalamus. So whatever the pituitary is producing turns off the hypothalamus. And this is a secondary feedback mechanism. This isn't as common. So that's just those two little, you got the two little dangly bits coming off the hypothalamus. That's when something that anterior pituitary or the posterior pituitary secretes tells the hypothalamus, hey, stop. Ultra short loop negative feedback is when the hypothalamus or the pituitary are secreting things that don't even go into the blood. So for short loop negative feedback, this does have to go into the blood to feedback. But here, ultra short loop, it doesn't even go to the blood. These are autocrine and paracrine signals. These two are considerably less common than the long loop negative feedback. Ultra short loop, super, super, super uncommon. So this is an image kind of showing from, it's actually not from your book, it's from another book, what these complex pathways can look like. And the way that I think about this, I'm going to make me bigger now. So I'm just going to be yapping. Maybe not. There we go. Okay. So the way that I think about this is, imagine that you're making cookies. And you're part of a assembly line. And there's somebody that is somebody that's putting all the ingredients in the mixing bowl, and then somebody that's turning on the mixer and making it mix, and then there's somebody that's scooping the cookies and putting them on the tray, and there's somebody that's passing the tray to you, and then you're putting the tray in the oven. There, all along the way, there are people that could say, hey, we need to stop. If you're the one putting the tray in the oven, you're like long loop negative feedback. You're like that peripheral endocrine gland. And so if you're putting the cookies in the oven, and then the ovens are full, and you say, hey, stop making cookies, the ovens are full. So that information has to go up to the very beginning, and everybody needs to stop making their stuff. So that's kind of like long loop negative feedback. But if we, let me go back here. So short loop negative feedback would be kind of like, you have at the very beginning, you have the person who dumps all the ingredients in, and then you have the person who's going to mix the ingredients, and the bowl is just completely full, we can't fit anything in it, and the person who's mixing the ingredients says, stop putting stuff in, stop. Okay? So that's like the pituitary talking to the hypothalamus, telling them to stop. Ultra short loop negative feedback, in this silly analogy, would be sort of like, if the person putting the ingredients in is the hypothalamus, they're putting the ingredients in, the pituitary's trying to mix, and the person putting the ingredients in, the pituitary doesn't necessarily have to yell at them to stop. They look over and they're like, oh, that's really full, and they stop. Okay. Super silly way to think of it. But if you think about it like an assembly line, and at different points in the assembly line, the people can give information back and cause the assembly line to stop producing whatever it is. Stop producing batter. Stop producing, stop scooping cookies because something is full, something is done. That's kind of what these feedback mechanisms are like. Okay. All right, so that's it for this little bit, and don't worry, we're gonna be digging a lot more into this, and we're gonna be clarifying these concepts about the endocrine system.